Welcome back to the Future of Money Virtual Summit. I'm Richard Tobinger, the founder of Conscious Marketer and the co-producer for the event. Now, if you missed yesterday's speakers, you can watch the replays. The links are on the side of this page, and there's also a full speaker schedule. Now, this morning we had Kay Xu from the Ono social platform. She called in from China and gave us really a fascinating look into how blockchain and crypto are changing both China and Asia. Talked a lot about tokens, super powerful call. Go back and watch that today. It's available for the next 24 hours. Coming up, we have Evan Caron. He's going to be speaking with us, and Adrian will introduce him very shortly. Later today, we actually have three additional talks. We have Warren Kritko, founder of Crypto University, Andrew Hewitt, the founder of GameChangers.co, and then at 7 p.m., we have TJ Matai and Chris Dideau, who will be talking about ICO analyzation. So I'm going to turn it over to Adrian Ashley. She's your co-host and author of Minting the Future. Take it away, Adrian.
Welcome, everyone, to the Future of Money. This is day 6 of our 10-day long journey to explore and dive deep into the world of cryptocurrency. Now, before we get started, I'm going to do as I always do and give you that short little disclaimer. The content of this summit is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide any specific tax, accounting, legal, or other investment advice, or provide the basis for any financial or investment decisions. You should always consult with a licensed professional to seek advice specific to your own situation. Okay, now let's get going. Welcome back to the Future of Money, the world's largest live online cryptocurrency summit. I'm Adrian Ashley, and I am going to be talking with Evan Caron. But before we start, before I introduce him, I want to mention again that there is a button for the cryptocurrency training kit. That is a special offer only available during the summit that gets you over 40 hours of talks, plus 25 speaker bonuses, and a program called the Cryptocurrency Mastery Program. The regular price is $497, and you can secure that now for just $297 during the summit. And it's the most comprehensive trading package in the market. So take advantage of that special offer now. You do not want to miss a single interview. And unless you've been chained to your chair like I am, you definitely have not seen them all. And there's been spectacular reveals on these calls. Now let me introduce Evan. Evan is a founding partner and managing director at Switch, a blockchain-based platform that tracks and verifies the impact of sustainability efforts and actions on the worldwide level of CO2 emissions. Evan has over 15 years of experience in energy and commodity markets, management, and trading. He has an entrepreneurial focus on business strategy and development for information technology, user experience, and sustainable and renewable energy globally. Before founding Switch in 2017, Evan co-founded Whistler, a company based out of Colorado that specializes in compliance, HR, and governance of enterprise intelligence. Evan has also served various boards in the energy sector, including MP2 Energy, is a member of the American Meteorological Society, and from 2012 to 2014, he was a managing director at Mercurial Energy America. Evan is also an active member of the Trailstone Group, where he helps to develop long-term value creation strategies for North American energy businesses. When Evan isn't working, he enjoys spending time on his small farm outside of Austin with his wife Danielle and their 3 rescue dogs, Zoe, Emma, and Lila. He's also passionate about supporting local entrepreneurs. Evan's going to be talking to us today about how we use blockchain to reward and incentivize pro-social behavior. So welcome, Evan. I am so excited to have you here today.
Ashley, Adrian, it's really exciting to be here and to be talking with you guys today and on this beautiful Sunday. So
thank you. And thank you for joining us on a Sunday. I know that's normally family time. The first thing, we're asking everyone, how is blockchain going to change the future of money and everything else? How is that going to impact the future, and getting everybody's baseline idea on that?
I think from my perspective, it represents an opportunity to create frictionless adoption of ideas and free flowing of kind of whether that's monetary value or community or membership or work. I feel like there's an opportunity, and that's where the opportunity exists. If you look at breaking down barriers, potentially, I guess, digitizing information, creating additional access to information, basically having people control their own information. That's the movement that's kind of underlying some of this. And one of the reasons why we're here is that we feel like there's a huge amount of opportunity in blockchain and social impact.
I agree. Now, one of the first things that I want to do is bust this myth. Now, I want everybody to understand blockchain is a technology. However, like all technology, it can morph, it can emerge, it can change, it can transmute. So, in the very beginning, we had blockchain as proof of work with Bitcoin. That's what everybody thinks of when they think of blockchain. Is lots of energy consumption, lots of computers slaving away, racing to get to an answer to win a reward. Then some new blockchains created proof of stake. So big whales could come in, buy a whole bunch of tokens, have a master node, and then they controlled the flow of it. But that still was, even though there's a lot of master nodes, still a little centralized. Not exactly awesome. But it doesn't have to be those two things only. Talk to me about what Switch is doing and how you're using proof of actual energy production to drive your blockchain.
Absolutely. Now, I say, and I agree with your statements there on kind of the evolution of consensus approaches in distributed ledger technology. And it's exciting if you look at the simplicity of some of the technologies like proof of work. It's fairly simple. You can prove an action has happened. You can prove without a third party that two transactions occurred on a network, and you can basically create a game that you need to solve to be able to create security and trust in a network. The proof of stake is kind of an evolution of that. It basically creates skin in the game and creates a economic loss and or cost for participating and validating in security and distributed ledger technology. As we move away from both of those systems, and it's a question of whether or not you need to have a fully permissionless ledger technology that can allow access to for anyone or anybody to validate transactions. I think that we're moving away from some of that. From our perspective, a physical event occurs in the world, right? Bound by laws of physics, laws of thermodynamics, and so things that you can actually track from a physical perspective, not some subjective, kind of, did you walk the dog today or did you throw away something from a recycling bin? Things that have metered based approaches rooted in physical constants are is something that we believe can replace how traditional consensus approaches are generated. And so, from our perspective, we are looking at data and securing data from devices specifically to create the type of trust and information that will allow for believing certain levels of information, but also that's kind of the basis for rewarding certain actions that actually can be proven by a physical device. So that's kind of the exciting approaches that we're going to take. And if you look at some of the evolution for consensus approaches in general, a fully permissionless ledger requires high computational costs to secure the network. If you look at permission based, or I would say semi-private networks that require registration, the difference is a zero-sum game and a cooperative game. And if you look at consensus approaches in distributed ledger technology and require reputation and or standing in a network, the computational cost of securing the network drops significantly. So if you know who you're dealing with, rather than being fully, anonymous, then the level of game changes significantly, and that's a function of mechanism design specifically. Is how do you create non-rivalrous games so that the network can trust the information in the network as well as trust who is providing that information. I think that's a big distinction between fully permissionless trust networks that have a level of distrust versus levels of networks that actually have trust. And that's the approach that we're taking from a commons approach to what they call commons governance, is really looking at, and we're getting deep into math here, is polycentric governance systems that can trust individual players. You have reputation and standing in networks, and you can use that as the basis for securing a distributed ledger technology.
Okay. So for the noobs in the group, which I don't know how many noobs there are, I would like to take everything you just said and now let's overlay a case study. Because I know this will make it so much more understandable. Because when you explained it to me, I was like, awesome. I get it. I totally get it.
So from the kind of, just to I guess maybe simplify it. I don't want to oversimplify it, but
Yeah.
from if you look at some of our research is kind of is based on very deep math in two ways: math on commons protocol management, which is how do you govern a commons? And when we mean by commons is how do you govern um, resources that are shared by a community, right? And
Mhm.
that's a community management works very well for small communities, right? If you're talking about your neighborhood association, how do you manage keeping the streets clean, right? If you have 10 neighbors in the neighborhood and everyone picks up
Right.
after themselves, well, then you have a clean neighborhood. Think about how complicated that gets when you start looking at bigger and bigger communities, right? You go from neighborhoods to municipalities, municipalities to cities, cities to states, states to countries, countries to the world, and it becomes much more challenging, right? So if you can ascribe a common approach to how people deal with a specific situation, so whether it's recycling or forestry management or fishery management, or really what from our perspective is really looking at the climate, is that you can ascribe a single goal, which is reduce carbon or reduce greenhouse gases, and then you can actually operate at what they call nested clusters, which is kind of, those nesting dolls, those Russian nest.
Mhm.
They're all kind of connected and attached, but they're all separate. That's the idea of polycentric systems where they're all nested vertically, but and this is not. I'm sorry. I'm complicating it again. Really, the
No, I
goal
like the Russian nested dolls. That was good.
the goal is to have small communities contribute to a common goal and a common good, and actually giving them the mechanisms to do that. And I think simplifying it again is how do you create a game, and how do you create and evaluate each member of that game in their impact to how the game gets played, and then what the overall end game is. And so the simplest way to approach that is think about what you want as your end game, and then figure out ways to design a game so that everyone benefits from the work that they do to the overall network. That's kind of the simplest way, I guess, I could kind of boil it down, but there's a lot more information out there on polycentric systems and commons resources, from Eleanor Ostrom to Robert Swan, and lots of information, Nobel Prize economics type of research. And so I kind of the guests of the show, if they're looking for weekend reading, it's a good week piece to read on polycentric governance and commons management, which is really the funny and weird thing about it is we think about this all the time, right? This is all we talk about on our team. This is all we talk about with our advisors is common governance and polycentric systems. And really, this is all about cryptocurrency. And this is something people don't talk about. They don't talk about this in distributed ledger technology. And it should be part of the narrative on a daily basis, because all of these distributed ledger technologies and all these cryptocurrencies and all these movements around decentralized governance and decentralized systems all require some level of commons resources and common pool management and commons governance. Whether they think it or not, there is a commons associated with all of these systems for network effects.
Mhm.
Have many users using a token or a currency, for people to hold currency and believe and support a system. That is a commons, and we really need to spend more time looking at building the right types of commons based approaches to really secure the future of what we're trying to accomplish in economies and world systems and distributed ledger technology in general.
Now, is that what people are referring to when they're talking about tokenomics? Like how the tokens function in their ecosystem, the rewards basis, the staking basis, and how those tokens flow through into and in and out of the platforms that we're building. Is that what they're talking about?
That there, I wouldn't say that the research that's been done is anything new. I think they're repurposing old economics textbooks basically and trying to create a digital version of that. I think a lot of the token economics are looking at how tokens or how a currency or how access can be designed for either scarcity and or for the right type of objective function, which is not creating inflationary economic roles. I mean, monetary policy in general is very challenging, but
Yeah, which is why it's centralized. So
right.
how are we going to decentralize the same level of economic interest?
That's right, and that's so creating a non-rivalrous game is very hard, and you have to make sure that all the actors in the network have, and there's a lot of math associated with this. There's mechanism design, which is a subset of economics associated with kind of I would call it an upgraded game theory type of approach. They call it as you mentioned, they call it mechanism design. It's relatively new math when you think about it in math terms. Some of the research that was published was as early or as late as 2005, which is, when you
Late.
think that's like young ways of thinking about things. And it's around it's so game theory is trying to understand people's objectives and people's incentives for doing for a certain action. Mechanism design is an upgraded version of that, where you have imperfect information and perfect information, and instead of playing the game, you design the end game. So you create what's the end game. If the end game of the currency is just to go up in value, you don't need to have all of these other systems and all these other things associated with that. There are very simple approaches to get there. If you want to decentralize the decision making of how to get there, then you have to implement dynamic approaches to getting there, right? Evolutionary and dynamic approaches to getting there. So if you think about Satoshi level proof of work, was the objective to be a multi-$100 billion cryptocurrency? And if it was, the parameters associated, or what they call the attributions associated with how the currency or how the token economics functions, should that be dynamic, right? And that's why you can have potentially multiple forks of one, of these public ledgers, because they're not fully sure that the old static rules associated with how a currency grows and how a network expands doesn't necessarily hold in every network, right? And it doesn't necessarily, what if a network gets picked up as a vital, high volume, high velocity currency when it was expected to be a low velocity staking token or low velocity um, token to hold? What happens when, if that gets picked up? What happens if something changes? You have to have the mechanisms in place to be able to change how the token economics function. And so one of the approaches is using oracles, using algorithms, basically uh, taking the hands off the wheel and looking at more decentralized governance around how tokens are minted, how tokens are rewarded, how incentives are allocated. That's one of the things we're working on at Switch from an infrastructure layer perspective, is using data commons and having models compete for fair allocations of resources, but really I would say rooted in economic theory and math libraries. Those are we feel like that's the way to do it. So mechanism design and commons pool management from Eleanor Ostrom. Those are the approaches that I think are going to win when the chips fall and we look at the simplest models. Those are going to be the ones that are going to be the ones that survive. The ones that create band-aids and layers of complexity around holding and staking and those are going to. It's just, you can't make up. I don't know if anyone's smart enough to make up a system and preordain a system that's going to grow in virally and potentially go from a network of one to a network of 1 billion. Designing that before it starts is I would say a near impossibility. So building evolutionary or biological based approaches to these models rather than mechanical, things that can evolve, things that can learn, things that can understand. So we talk about artificial intelligence, not in the way of learn, or traditional artificial intelligence, and systems that can evolve over a period of time based on specific feedback loops. And that's lacking in today's marketplace. I think we're going to get there. There's been an evolution in crypto 1.0 and crypto 2.0, and I think the token economics are going to go through a similar evolution in its way of thinking about these approaches. And there's a bunch of research associated with old ways of doing it, which require slightly bigger, a bit more thought in a more digital way, and moving away from valuing a cryptocurrency based on its velocity and how many people hold the token and how often the token transfer. That's, I'm not dogging it, but that's like 1.0 stuff, right? It's not evolved way of thinking. We should be in a much more evolved way of thinking associated with. It's not the value of the currency. It's about how the network scales and grows, who can benefit from it, what design components are going to work, which ones aren't. We haven't figured that out yet. That's coming.
So you said two things, three things, bunch of things. Awesome. Okay. You said the word Oracle, and I want to track back to that, but I also want to know, what do you think the role of AI is going to play? Because right now, like you said, we've got these rules, we've got these algorithms. As I keep trying to say, an algorithm is not a rule set. I mean, I do this with Yelp all the time. They're like, we have an algorithm. I'm like, no, you have a rule set and it's a filter. It's not an algorithm and it is not intelligence. So artificial intelligence, what role is that going to play in blockchain, as well as describe what your Oracle actually does? Because it's super fascinating to me.
Yes. So those are two great questions, right? So AI and machine learning, and it's going to move away from rules based, and it's going to be moving much more towards creating multiple simulations, and basically, using the artificial intelligence, I guess, of the network, and trying to, if you taking a step back, fully, without a human involved, we're still not there yet, right? We're getting there, but using machine learning approaches towards being able to evolve a system, that's going to be the next step. But, full AI talking to AI with no human involved. It's getting there. We're not there yet, right? They
The
say that
rise
like
of the machines.
80% of the code that's written now is written by computers, which is insane. But 80% of all now is not actually generated by a human; it's generated by a computer. So if you if you can apply that type of thinking, where you don't have a human designing, oh, you need to stake 5,000 tokens to get a master node. Okay, well, why? Why is it 5,000? Why is it not 50,000? Why is it not 500,000? Why is it not 5,000 today and 2,000 tomorrow and 1,000 in the next minute? So if you're looking at if you're looking at trying to remove the centralized approaches towards governing some of these new distributed ledger technologies, then you're going to need to have machines with that aren't operating with a lot of bias, trying to understand what the objective function of the network is. If the objective function of the network is high throughput, high velocity transactions for global payments, then it's going to be way different of a system than it is going to be for managing food and supply chain. Right? It's just they're not the same, and they can't operate on the same framework, and operate under the same AI and math libraries. Also, with traditional AI, you shouldn't just have one resource building the code, right? You should have dozens or hundreds or thousands of quants and modelers and computers and simulations all competing for what I would call consensus approach towards fair allocation of resources. So, as an example, if you're using Palantir to do AI on data, well, why don't you have 10 of them, right? So creating
Mhm.
a consensus approach to outputs rather than just one model, right? So if you have 50 models, that all 50 models that don't talk to each other are all competing for an approach, right, or an outcome. That keeps some sanity in there, some safety checks in there. It doesn't create groupthink, right? So you have the same data but completely different models, and the way that they weight the information, et cetera. So that's where I think things are going, and I think things need to get there fairly soon. For some of the more simple approaches to some of these distributed ledger systems, doesn't necessarily need AI, right? I mean, you have very simple blockchain projects that are application focused. They don't need AI. But call it out as it is. It's not decentralized. It's a centralized company that's managing distributed ledger, managing encrypted information on a distributed ledger. Let's call it for what it is. It's not a blockchain. It's not anything really super exciting. It might be needed, but it's not in the ideological sense what we're trying to accomplish here. So we can put it into different categories. Just the same thing as businesses today. Some business today are going to be infrastructure, and some business today are going to be an application of infrastructure, and some businesses today are going to be, a mobile app. And just everybody doesn't have to be everything, right? Everyone doesn't have to be their own blockchain or their own movement, right? They're part of a movement, right? So anyway, I'll pause there on that, from
Well,
AI perspective.
well, what was interesting to me, so I have been told multiple times that once we hit quantum computing, game over. Our current proof of work, proof of stake, none of that's going to matter. So to me, that makes your model even more crucial, because your model is based on actual physical actions that benefit the world but don't cost the energy, that are about renewable energy production. But there are also things that a quantum computer cannot, solve in 2 seconds, because it has to actually be generated. So what happens when we get to the point where somebody gets a quantum computer, and in 10 minutes we've now hit almost 21 million, and will we ever get to the 21 million Bitcoin? Because as we get closer, the difficulty doubles and the reward halves. So you would think that forever and ever and ever it would have. It's never going to go past 8 decimal points. So then what happens at the very end? When do we get the last Bitcoin?
From my perspective, the quantum computing, reducing the increasing the efficiency of ASIC processing, technology from 14 nanometers to 8 to 7 to 2. I don't know where that goes, right? I mean, I think you can. The network is designed that the more hash power that exists on the network, the harder it is to generate additional tokens. And so, if the Bitcoin network is more successful, it would become more challenging. I think from a quantum computing perspective, we're still not there yet, right? We're still in the lab, and everyone's wearing trench coats, and there are opportunities that are there. And the question is where does quantum computing? I think quantum computing, if it happens, when it happens, the question is where do we point the resources for quantum computing? Do we point it to a $300 billion market capitalization problem, or do we point it to solving like really, really challenging problems
like world hunger,
or like cancer, or like things? I mean, 300 billion is a small number in the grand scheme of things. So if I had a quantum computer, would I point it to breaking the Bitcoin network first? Probably
for 5 minutes. You'd only need 5 minutes, and then you'd have all of it, right?
All of it. But then this question of so that's a question of who controls the quantum computing resources in the world. Number one. Number two is if you look at some of the concerns around quantum computing and being able to break the SHA-256 encryption algorithm. If you can break that, then the security of these distributed networks go away very quickly.
Right.
That is a challenge, and it's kind of been one of those existential threats to these distributed ledger technologies. As I'm sure somebody very smart will figure out a solution around that. And from our perspective, we're less worried about that, and we're more worried about the existential crisis that's facing humanity in terms of climate change, world hunger, emerging new threats from biological bacteria that have existed in the permafrost for millennia, and they're actually going to be released for the first time ever. So we're more concerned about real world problems than digital problems, I suppose. But yeah, that exists, and I think really smart people are trying to figure out and work on it, right? So it's people much smarter than me. So from our perspective,
and you are one of the smartest people I know.
Appreciate that. From our perspective, we want to create trust in information. We want to create trust in things that are rooted in physical constants like law of thermodynamics, law of conservation of energy. We want to understand. We want to be able to track and trace the conversion of a BTU to an electron, the conversion of a photon to an electron. And from that perspective, we have a much easier job rather than preventing distributed ledger technology from being broken by quantum computing. And all we really have to do is trust information from an IoT device, right? And that's where we're focused on figuring out how can we trust information. So moving the quantum computing, breaking everything aside, if we can take IoT device information and trust that the data that exists on the device and the action that was tracked or sensed from a device is accurate, then we can do a lot with that information, right? That information becomes an asset. It's not just data. And some people say data is not a four-letter word, but the information associated with that information is powerful. It's informative. It's going to inform the AI models of the future. It's going to inform the machine learning algorithms of the future, and it's going to allow us to create clean energy. It's going to allow us to create efficient energy. In our use case, energy specifically, but more information. More good information and quality information is going to benefit systems everywhere. And so we believe from a social impact perspective is that if you can increase the resolution of data and you can trust that information is accurate and valid, the information and that will inform the AI models of the future to actually create real world impact and improve lives of as many people as possible. So let's take the advantages in machine learning and artificial intelligence, improve the quality of data that these engines and these algorithms can actually ingest, and then the output is a benefit for all. That's where we think things can go very quickly, and they should go, and we should be able to apply really smart things and really smart systems to really, really hard problems rather than just program trading on stock exchanges. Let's take those models and figure out ways to get modify logistics to get energy to the global south, figure out ways to provide the billion people in the world who still don't have clean water, figure out ways to what, say bank the unbanked and create, information access to the global populations, figure out how to track and trace outbreaks of disease and foodborne illness. Those are the things that we can take this kind of technological advancement that we're seeing in blockchain and all the attention associated with it, and apply it to non-financial systems. I think that's where we need social entrepreneurs that are really smart to put the fintech stuff aside and really focus on like world tech or impact tech.
What was so fascinating to me was that even though Bitcoin and the white paper for Bitcoin was about money, it wasn't actually about money. It was about exactly what you just said. It was about the social impact. It was about the unbanked. It was about people being able to participate in an economy that couldn't because there was no mechanism to do so. It was about protecting us from the centralized banks and from the crashing and from, politicians lying to us and saying everything's fine, and then oops, behind the government, it's really not. And giving more autonomy to we the people. And I've noticed that, percentage wise, the number of people in blockchain who are focused on social impact is so much a much greater percentage than in normal entrepreneurship and normal business. You've got a very small percentage focused on nonprofits and social good. But on the crypto side, I feel like it, just based on the people that I've met, it's really 50-50. It's like, we're going to, not only have we mapped out DNA, we're now going to track DNA with these genomes, with these different things. There was something that came out yesterday that I read that I have to read it 10 more times, and I'm smart, but it was like super high level medical thingy, but they're almost to the point where they can take in all these data sources like you were talking about with the IoT devices and literally figure out based on actual results, this gene mutation plus this environmental impact plus this toxin or bacteria or whatever will equal cancer. Like they're almost there to the point where they can unlock things. And so is that ability, I feel like we're literally on the precipice of the age of the machines, and we're going to go to Terminator and the machines are going to take over, and utopia.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, it just depends on where you apply it. I think from my perspective that you talk about collaboration, you talk about creating what we call a data commons, but without shared information, siloed information benefits and siloed information benefits one party, where we're talking about, and just kind of the overall idea is this kind of non-rivalrous sharing of information and sharing of community of a network. And that's where whole decentralized distributed ledger technology kind of from a movement perspective really makes a lot of sense. So incentivize, without better information, all of the data that exists and all the research and all the science, if you can't collaborate, it's just, and again, it's just not going to work. Right. And there's been global collaboration on some of the early internet, right? When we talk about mapping genomes and using distributed computation power to do that. Right. I mean, that's been a thing. But now it's, you take the intrinsic reward of helping and you apply some extrinsic incentive for participating in a global community of commons. Things change very quickly, and forget about like actually earning money or earning some type of financial incentive, but the approaches to how you create cooperation in a non-cooperative group of people is one of the first times we can actually do it. Right, the internet kind of started that, and now it's kind of like it's accelerating on a daily basis. And so that's what's super exciting to me is you could take some of the failures associated with creating these consortiums and tying it back to energy specifically. If you look at, there's big problems in the world, right? We have food issues, we have issues
Water.
And a lot, some people think climate is the most existential threat that humanity faces right now. If you look
Well, it is if you talk about the permafrost and letting all those bacteria out. That's an issue.
That's just like the people who are deep in the science. But we're talking about what does the single largest acceleration of temperature in recorded history. Like we're talking about not just since like humans been around, but like where we actually can go back in time and look at permafrost and look at CO2 layers in the atmosphere, and everybody knows about greenhouse gases, but we're looking at the single largest and the single fastest warming event in recorded history, And what does that do to populations? What does that do to food supply? What does that do to extreme weather? What does that do to and what's going to end up happening is it's going to disproportionately affect lower income and communities, and it's going to disproportionately affect coastal communities. And so, if you look at what we can do today, it's a monumental problem, right? It is so big that one single person's action won't necessarily impact what needs to happen in 20 years. And so, how do you create a system where tracking the externality of an event can actually will impact daily life, right? So if I shut all my lights off right now,
Yeah.
what you have to create a commons goal. You have to create a community around a shared effort, and it can't just be one person. It can't just be one country. This is one of the reasons why the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Climate Accord were designed to fail. They were not designed to win. It's a band-aid. It's a policy. It's a what we call static policy. And so
It looks good. It's a goodwill public election thing.
people want to do it, right? There's a lot of people who wake up in the world every day and want to change the world. They want it, but there's no mechanism for them to do it. There's no platform for them to do it other than donate money and donate time. There's actually no way for them to do it. And it all goes through centralized resources like foundations and missions and NGOs and whatever else. And whether they're effective or not, that's based on the management of the NGO. That's not really based. You could dump $100 million into a project and none of it can go to the actual people, right? And so,
Mhm.
I think from that perspective, the blockchain technology, what it's been able to enable from a community standpoint, from a frictionless adoption standpoint, a borderless standpoint, it's the fact that it's digital and it can be adopted like instantaneously. You can become part of a network in a second rather than in a year or anyway. So the fact that we have these global problems, we need to come up with these global mechanism-based solutions, and I think for the first time in kind of history, we actually can do it. And I think it's there's a real shot we can. The technology's there, the will is there, the effort's there, the money's there. We just got to do it, and that's kind of why we're here.
I'm just fascinated because I feel like, almost like at the beginning of the industrial age where all of a sudden we went from, people lugging things, and then we got a wheel, and then we got iron, and then we got machines. It's like that all happened relatively quickly back then. I feel like we're going exponentially quicker now, and everything is shifting and changing. So what is this going to be like when we're working with community and we're collaborating? I know we collaborate on the space program, even though we kind of jockey for position. Really, China, Kazakhstan, Russia, and the United States their scientists play really well together when it comes to the International Space Station and getting everything done. I specifically think about medical DNA, genome research, drug trials, those kinds of things. Uh, Pharmaceutical companies, they spend a lot of money on research, and I know like 3 or 4 of them are going after the same thing at the same time. They're all dumping money into it because they want that first mover advantage. We could be solving the world's health problems by collaborating in an open source nature, but that would take away huge industries and profit. So what is that going to look like for the landscape of the economy when all of a sudden we say, okay, healthcare needs to be for everybody. We need to cure cancer. We need to do it now. So we're on a mission. Everybody's open source. Go. What is that going to do to the economics of the world? How are we going to change that?
Yeah, I mean that's a scary. When you think about
Scary.
robotics, you think about AI. These are some of the existential kind of thoughts that people are having. They're having to try to identify how the world is going to be different than it is today. And if you look at capitalism, it's fairly new. I mean, economies have been around. Societies are going to have to figure out whether they're going to try to make as much money as possible or provide as much impact as possible. And business models are going to have to change. I mean, it takes time. Some of the biggest disruptions happen before your eyes, and you don't even recognize that they're there until you've gotten there. And that happened with the internet. That happened with mobile phones. That happened with there's a lot of stuff. And happened with blockchain. Just happened, right? So these overnight transformations seem to the people who are in it don't recognize they're in it until it's too late. So there's a lot of thought going around that. I don't know if anyone has a perfect answer there. If you look at I think focusing on marketplaces and businesses that have a collective interest to share rather than control those are going to be the ones that are going to go first. The ones that have high friction, high regulatory moats, and or protection based, whether it's from utilities or whether it's from pharmaceuticals or things of that nature, are going to take a little bit longer, right? I think from an ideological perspective, you'd want all those barriers to be broken down, every pharma company to share as much information as possible. That's just not the case. So where does it come from? It comes from research institutions, it comes from academia, it comes from publicly funded or public-private partnerships that are funded on collaboration efforts. It's happening in immunotechnology. It's about consortiums. It's about sharing information. Some businesses won't exist, right? Some businesses might move all to impact. Some businesses will continue to evolve. All we know is that things will not be as they are today, right? So it's
Mhm.
not decide kind of what the future holds. I think we just know that it will not be like it is right now. So I like focusing on places where we can create non-rivalrous games where everyone who contributes can benefit. Those are going to be the places that we're going to see the biggest change. And again, even if you look at the energy industry in general, there's still a coal lobby. I mean, coal's not good, right? So we know that coal,
No, clean coal. Have you not listened to our president?
clean
Clean
coal,
coal.
but we don't have clean coal technology yet. It's not there yet, right? We need if we wanted to subsidize coal, let's subsidize research for coal gasification and carbon sequestration rather than pay again. And hopefully I don't get a hit on me from the coal utility, but um, rather than paying coal plants to continue to generate, charge coal plants a lot of money to continue to generate and funnel that money instead of going to, funnel that pool of money and all of those incentives back to research institutions to create carbon sequestration technology and clean coal gasification technology or new technology that can leverage a natural resource that we have that's pretty much global and the infrastructure is there for it.
Mhm.
Coal clean, but we're not there yet. Giving coal plants an extra $2 is the wrong approach. Charging a coal plant an extra $2 might be the right approach, or funneling $1 billion of incentives to the next research institution or the next company to go build clean coal technology. That's where we need to be focused, thinking about redeploying incentives, and that's one of the key messages of Switch is how do you redeploy the right types of incentive structures to get technology to follow from and create cleaner technology. That's kind of the main approach that we're trying to solve.
So you and I had talked before about, I have connections in Jamaica and they use oil for they produce what is it that they propane or no oil they burn things that are not clean.
Fuel oil, bunker fuel. They use
Bunker
diesel.
fuel.
They would. I mean, if you look at Kenya, Kenya uses about 90% of for deforestation. I think they're tearing down. I mean, incredible forests, incredible jungles to burn wood for heat. I mean, we have solar technology that can basically generate heat from a a heat one of those hot pots. I mean, we can
Mhm.
generate electricity. There's more efficient ways to do it. We don't have to burn our natural resources to do it. I think
Or the whole forest that actually provide the oxygen for the earth. We
see
kind of need that.
about in the 1800s, what did we burn for light? We hunted
Candle.
and we used whale oil to burn whale oil. That was what we did. Like we legitimately killed all the whales to use it in candles. Like in 100 years, people are gonna be like, "You did what? You took oil out of the ground and you used it to drive cars? Like you took oil out of the ground and you used it to, you know, create electricity? That seems insane. Like that's going to be the same. That's what's going to happen. If people are going to look back, if we're still here, that's what's going to look back and say, wait a minute, you guys melted the polar ice cap so you could pull oil out of the ground, so you can power cars to drive, so you can work more. Like something's not right. So anyway, that's a bit of a future way of thinking, but I feel like that's what we're going to be look back on this less than 100 years of burning oil, right? If you think about real oil discovery, the underground oil, like early 1900s, 1920s, 1910s, like 1930s when oil came to Saudi, when they found oil in Saudi Arabia looking for water. We're about 100 years in, 90 years in. Look what the damage we've done.
Yep.
Okay, time to reverse that, right? We need stuff to fix that now.
Yeah, I agree. That's why my son wants to colonize Mars.
Yeah, well, some people are looking at off-world solutions. I think we can still save this planet. We're just gonna have to move to the mountains like you did.
And that was, I know you were talking about coastal communities, and I miss the ocean, and I now live in a Mile High city, and I was like, hopefully this is not going to be beachfront anytime soon.
Get some time. Look at where the last large global warming event, the oceans were about 170 to 80 feet higher than they were today, maybe 100 feet higher than they were today.
Yeah.
Back millions of years now at this point. So that's assuming all the ice caps melt, would be very bad. But that's, Mile High. We got some time for that. We got
We got some time. Okay, good. Glad I'm safe here. So I want to thank you so much for coming on our international live largest crypto summit ever. You're fascinating. You're one of my very favorite people to talk to. Is there anything else that you want the audience to understand about blockchain, about Switch, about what they can do, how they can dive in, where they can go, what they should be doing?
I think from a research perspective, and just a plugging Switch a little bit, the tokencommons.org, which is a foundation that basically manages the Switch project, has a lot of thought leadership around governing commons and community management. I think I implore everyone to do research on polycentric systems if they have the time, and read up on Eleanor Ostrom and how she viewed commons pools management and common pool management. From to getting involved in Switch, it's being able to figure out ways to kind of register yourself and your assets and your information, and then support. From more of a personal thing, is support more sustainable ways of living. Right? I mean, use less, shut the lights off when you leave the house. There's small ways to make big impacts, and I feel like everyone needs to think about what they use and when they use it, and that energy is not an infinite resource right now. Plastic is bad in many ways. Use less, and just be more mindful of your impact on the planet, and everyone's impact matters. And so I know it sounds a bit squishy and whatever else, but not taking that plastic straw is going to save 80% of all the waste in our oceans comes from our rivers. So that's it's bad. We just got to do more. And if you have the time and you have the resources, a lot of people are focused on just living day to day. Small little adjustments won't make a huge impact on your daily life. And so think about how you use and how you reuse, and support local programs, support local recycling in the places where you can contribute. If you don't have the money to put up a rooftop solar system, shut your lights off, right? Get blinds, right? And put your blinds down. Put your air conditioner, if you're lucky enough to have AC, at 78 instead of 72. But those are can be done today if you can't contribute. And if you can contribute, joining communities, joining blockchain communities that revolve around social impact. They're very strong communities, people who are passionate. It's a special breed of people who are what I call social entrepreneurs, people who are tackling the world's biggest problems and doing it for the right reasons. And looking at, a quote that some people have said is, and I've kind of reimagined, is not trying to make the most money, but impact the most people. Those are the people that are we should look at that are changing the world, and we need to support them in any way possible. So, from a technical perspective, there's plenty of information that I could bore everyone to tears on our website. Definitely take a look. Our Oracle stuff is really cool. I think that's going to be a game changer for how tokenized economies and ecosystems function. I think dynamic staking and dynamic reward allocation, and using mechanism design to effectively change how incentive systems are distributed or allocated. That's going to be a game changer, and I think people are going to start seeing the emergence of new ways of economic thinking around distributed ledger systems and digital currencies in general.
I love it. You've given our audience so much to think about. I am thankful that you could come on today, Evan, and I really appreciate you coming onto the summit and talking to us today. So I want to remind everyone that you can own the entire training summit through our cryptocurrency training kit. Again, this gets you all downloadable access to the videos, the audios, transcripts too, for those of you who'd prefer to read rather than watch videos or listen, and the bonus gifts from the speakers, all for only $297. You'll also get a special bonus training called the Crypto Mastery Program that we are producing right now. And after the summit, the price of this training program will be $497. So if you'd like to own the materials and refer back to them at your convenience, now is the time. So thank you so much. And everyone, please go to tokencommons.org to learn more about Evan, more about the Switch project, as well as the resources that he just mentioned. Thank you so much, Evan. I really appreciate you coming.
Great seeing you.
Great seeing you too.